Welcome to my first book haul of 2025. What a great way to start a year where I want to reduce my physical TBR by bringing 25 books onto my TBR. I'm gesturing this way because they're down there. That's a lie, actually, because some of these books are repurchases of books that I've already read. Nonetheless, it's still 20 books added to my TBR. This also doesn't include any books I got for Christmas. That will be a separate video. All of these books are simply my own decisions. They're mostly secondhand, not all of them, but a fair chunk of them are. And there are a couple of Oxfam bookshops in London that are like the creme de la creme. I'm going to gatekeep them. I'm not going to tell you what ones they are, but they always have such a good selection. And sometimes I go in there, and that is what happened on one trip in particular, where I'm like, a book girly has been here. Like someone who has very similar taste to me has been here. And maybe they're one of those readers that doesn't keep a million books in their house. Maybe they read something and then they just get rid of it. Or maybe they were moving house. Either way, I'm grateful to whoever that book girly out there is. To give this a bit of structure, we're going to start with the 2 nonfiction books, the 1 poetry book. Then we're going to do the more kind of literary-ish fiction. We're going to transition into romance. Then we're going to do young adult and children's books. Okay? Good plan. Unsurprisingly, the 2 nonfiction books I got are about women's bodies. So I got Gross Anatomy, My Curious Relationship with the Female Body by Mara Altman. I love witty science books about women's bodies. It's a niche that I enjoy. And this is about the author's relationship that she has with her own body and kind of how shifting and volatile and apprehensive that relationship often is, and how that has led her to ponder lots of interesting things about her body. Not only from kind of a biological scientific point of view, but also from a more kind of social science point of view and cultural studies point of view. And through this combination of science, history, sociology, anthropology, her own witty and personal confessions and observations, she's telling us a lot about the gross things about the female body. And I love that. Make women gross again. Love it. Then I picked up a book that I have been dying to get my hands on for years, and I was so glad to find it affordably secondhand. That is The Vagina, A Literary and Cultural History by Emma L.E. Rees. I do think this one is actually fairly academic, but it is an exploration of the vagina as this cultural symbol, the role that it has played in kind of literary and cultural history, as the subtitle says. I do think this will be quite scholarly, but I'm hoping also quite accessible. The poetry book I picked up was Mayday by Jackie Kay. I have read quite a lot of Jackie Kay's poetry and her fiction, and I love her work. And this collection is a sequence of elegies for her parents, but also has a lot to do with political landscapes, political dimensions, love, loss. As I said, I've read a lot of this poet before, so I feel really confident that I'm going to like this one. Okay, now the fiction. I'm going to start with a short story collection. So this is The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night by Jen Campbell, who of course many of you may know from her other books, but also her booktube channel. I think this collection of stories is going to be really curious, slightly surrealist, have some magical fantasy fairy tale elements to it. Short story collections are always a bit of a mixed bag for everyone, I think, but I'm intrigued to see how I get on with this one because I don't always love short story collections, but the themes in this sound quite interesting to me. Summer Water by Sarah Moss. So I've already read this. This is just a replacement for a proof copy that I had because I wanted to get the actual finished thing. This is set on an incredibly rainy day on the summer solstice and follows 12 different people who are all cooped up in this cabin holiday park. And it's a really acutely observed commentary on how all of the different people interact with each other, how they perceive each other, and I love Sarah Moss. So yes, this was just replacing a proof copy that I had. Speaking of proof copies, Bookbreak very kindly sent me a copy of Thirst Trap by Grania O'Hare. So this follows a group of friends in Belfast living in a house share. This house has been home to all of the kind of antics of their 20s, but these friends are also grieving. There are currently 3 girls that live in this house share, and Lydia's room remains untouched following her death. I think this is going to hit me in the emotions quite severely. This might be one that I keep hold of until the Irish Readathon in March. And likely the same for The Happy Couple by Nisha Dolan. So I read her debut novel Exciting Times when it first came out and I enjoyed it a lot. This follows a couple who externally would be perceived as an incredibly happy one, as the title suggests. But in the lead up to their big wedding day, things begin to unravel about their relationship, including Celine's disinterest in the relationship, but also Luke's serial cheating habits. But I think this is also an ensemble novel about the various other people in their lives and how their lives and their complications intersect with the couple. The subject matter of this actually sounds way more interesting and compelling to me than Exciting Times did, so I think I'm really gonna like this one. This next one was such a cover buy for me. I was in an independent bookshop for work and they'd just got this book in and I needed to buy it. This is She's Always Hungry by Eliza Clark, so another short story collection. I've not read any Eliza Clark before, even though she has come recommended to me. My association with her fiction is kind of those books that are like, I support women's rights and women's wrongs. But I also think this is another short story collection where the stories are going to be a bit weird. I love this cover so much. I couldn't leave it in the shop. I also have two very short books. We're always glad to have short books on the TBR. This is The Inseparables by Simone de Beauvoir, and I had never heard of this book before, and when I saw it, I was like, this needs to come home with me. I am fascinated. I read a lot of Simone de Beauvoir's like non-fiction or her like scholarly analysis at university. Like there were quotes from Simone de Beauvoir that I just like knew off in my head, like academic quotes. I'm gonna read you the blurb of this one because the blurb is what sold me on this book. When Andre joins her school, Sylvie is immediately fascinated. Andre is small for her age but walks with the confidence of an adult. The girls become close. They talk for hours about equality, justice, war, and religion. They lose respect for their teachers. They build a world of their own. But as the girls grow into young women, the pressures of society mount, threatening everything. This novel was never published in Simone de Beauvoir's lifetime. It tells the story of the real-life friendship that shaped one of the most important thinkers and feminists of the 20th century. I am fascinated by Simone de Beauvoir, and I had no idea that this existed. So I'm so excited to read it. And then the book in this haul that I think the fewest amount of people will be interested in, so do feel free to skip forward like 45 seconds, is J.L. Carr's How the Steeples Cinderbury Wanderers Won the FA Cup. This has been a book that's been on my radar for such a long time, and I'm so glad that I found a copy of it secondhand because I'm not convinced that like I'm going to love it, but I am fascinated by the idea of it. So this follows a very obscure, low-tiered ranking football team in England who like don't have much money, they don't have like any real profile, but it follows them on their journey all the way to Wembley when they win the FA Cup, the biggest knockout tournament in English domestic football. I think this is also quite mixed medium in how it's told, so it's told in like unreliable character recollections, it's told in newspaper articles, in meetings of minutes, and I think it's meant to be quite funny. I am fascinated by this, but I know most people probably aren't. Next, I have a book that sounds like the most precious thing in the world, and that is Arthur and Teddy Are Coming Out by Ryan Love. So this follows a 79-year-old grandfather named Arthur who gathers his family together because he is about to come out as gay, and this receives quite an interesting reception from the family. Meanwhile, we also have his grandson who is 21, and turns out he is also gay, but not ready to come out of the closet, as it were. And this novel is about the relationship and dynamic between those two characters, two men coming out at very different stages in their lives and what that means for their lifestyles and the changing dynamics in their family. I think this is just going to be such a gorgeous book, unlike anything that I've read before. Okay, so Marian Keyes is going to transition us from the more sort of literary stuff into the romance. I picked up two books from Marian Keyes. I picked up Angels and Anybody Out There. These are both books in the Walsh series, so the series of books that follows a group of sisters in the same family. Are either of these the next Marian Keyes book that I need to read? No. Did I get them anyway? Yes. Actually, one of these was a birthday present, so it's not my fault. I am definitely going to read every single book that Marian Keyes ever writes, so I don't really feel bad about adding her books to my shelves. We should never feel bad about adding any books to our shelves. Books are good. Okay, now we're very much in like the romance. This is My Vampire Plus One by Jenna Levine. This is the follow-up to My Roommate is a Vampire, which I read not Halloween Just Gone, but the one before that, and I had a great time. This is gonna sit on my shelf until Halloween 2025 because I am gonna want to read it around spooky season. I thought the first book in this series was so funny. It was one of the most like enjoyable, pure, fun, joyous books that I read in 2023. So I know I'm gonna like this one as well. I picked up a couple of Laura Jane Williams books. Laura Jane Williams is one of my favorite romance writers. Like, everything that she writes I feel really hits the spot. So in this one, Love Struck, we are following Becca, who feels like she is totally ready for Mr. Right. She is manifesting him, and after she hosts this like manifestation ceremony, she gets a text almost immediately from her ex-boyfriend, and she knows that it's a sign. But a sign for what? Let's find out. And then enemies to lovers, I wonder what trope this is about. Actually, do I really need to explain what this is about? It's enemies to lovers and they're on a beach. I think I know what's gonna happen. Next we have Let the Games Begin by Rafaro Faith Mazarora. This is a romance set at the Summer Olympics. There is Zeke, who is the star athlete of Team GB, and then we have Olivia, who has just landed her like dream role behind the scenes. I mean, I don't think we need to say much more than that. It's a Summer Olympics romance. Next, I have Double Booked by Lily London. So this is about our main character, Georgina, who has a very kind of strict, regimented, structured life. But then one mad night, she ends up auditioning for a famous lesbian pop band, and she realizes that maybe she wants to lead the kind of life that they do. She wants to make music, and also she really fancies the drummer. So she's just realized that she's a raging bisexual. Love that for her. So she's kind of torn between these two lives, this more like structured, regimented one, and this more kind of creative, free life. And she decides to do what any sane person would do, which is like split herself in half. I don't quite know how that's gonna work, how she's gonna live this double life, but I'm intrigued to see. Then I have The Friend Zone Experiment by Zen Cho. So this is a second chance romance where we are following the hugely successful Renee. She runs her own women's clothing company. She's hugely successful, wealthy, beautiful. She's dating an incredibly hot pop star, but then she gets dumped. And Renee starts feeling very lonely. She's also estranged from her family in Singapore. But then it turns out her father is retiring and all of her older brothers are pretty much screw-ups, so they're not in line to inherit the business. She is being tipped as being the successor of this business that is one of the largest conglomerates in Southeast Asia. So not only does she have all of that going on, but then she also bumps into her ex-boyfriend from university. And all of that sounds quite messy and complicated, and I'm here for it to see how Renee deals with all of that. Okay guys, we are almost at the end of the haul. We have 6 books to go, 3 young adult books and 3 children's books. Perfectly Preventable Deaths by Deirdre Sullivan. This is another one where I am just replacing a proof copy that I had. This is the second book in this witchy duology from Irish author Deirdre Sullivan. I really enjoyed this series when I read it a couple of years ago, and I just wanted to have a final copy for my shelves rather than a proof. Then I also have a copy of Officially Losing It by Rebecca Anderson. And this is a story about first time sex for teenagers and all the complications in the emotions and the relationship dynamics when it comes to that point. So this is about Rose and Joel, who decide to sleep together. They are in a long-term committed relationship, but the first time they try to have sex, they just can't make it work. Now, the only problem with this is that Rose has already told her best friend that she and Joel have slept together. And it also starts to put a bit of pressure on that relationship as well. I read a fair few books that are about kind of first experiences of sex and the different dynamics and complications to that. But this comes at it from an angle that I've not seen before, so I'm intrigued to see what the author does with it. I also have a copy of The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. So this is a gorgeous queer novel told in verse. I read this a few years ago and loved it, so I just was picking up a physical copy of it because I originally got it from the library. And then as for the children's books, I picked up a copy of Greenwild, The World Behind the Door by Parry Thompson. This is a highly acclaimed middle grade fantasy novel that follows our main character, Daisy, escaping from boarding school in a bid to try and find her missing mother. And she finds herself entering into a new magical world. This world is full of botanical wonders and greenery and magic, and it sounds like exactly the kind of middle grade magic that I love reading about. I picked up a copy of Ghost Boys by Jill Parker Rhodes. Unusually, this is one that I picked up having not heard about the book before, but when I read the blurb, I just thought it sounded so powerful, so I'm going to read it to you. 12-year-old Jerome doesn't get into trouble. He goes to school, he does his homework, he takes care of his little sister. Then Jerome is shot by a police officer who mistakes his toy gun for a threat. As a ghost, watching his family trying to cope with his death, Jerome begins to notice other ghost boys. Each boy has a story, and they all have something in common. Bit by bit, Jerome begins to understand what really happened, not just to him, but to all of the ghost boys. I mean, this sounds incredibly powerful. It sounds like essential reading. And I think books that make really difficult topics accessible for younger readers are incredibly important. And then finally, I have a copy of Witch Spark by Dominique Valente. This is another one that sounds like exactly the kind of middle grade magic that I really enjoy reading. So this is about a young witch who cannot find her spark. She cannot find her magic. And if her magic doesn't appear, there are really terrible consequences for not just her, but her whole family. Their magical house risks ending up in the clutches of an evil witch. Meanwhile, across the land, we have Princess Victoria. She has secret magical powers that are beginning to spiral out of control and cause chaos at the royal palace. Both of these girls turn to a forbidden magical course run by Miss Hegarty, and the lessons in this forbidden class are very difficult and very powerful, and we follow these two young witches trying to figure out their magic. As I said, this sounds like the perfect middle grade magical fantasy that I really enjoy, so very pleased to have a copy of this one. Okay, that is it. They are all 25 books that I now need to get homes on the shelf for. I know it looks like we've got a lot of space, but these are a lot of books. Let me know down in the comments if you have any thoughts on any of the books that I have discussed today. Let me know if you have read them. Do you think I'm gonna like them? Is there a flamingo emoji? If there is, leave me a flamingo emoji in honor of the black flamingo. If there isn't a flamingo emoji, just leave me, I don't know, like any old bird. That is it for me today. I hope you're doing well. I hope I read all of these books. I will talk to you in my next video.